city council president and PJ and the attendees that you can promote them?
I know, but you're talking too loud. I'm in the meeting.
We can't hear you, Mr. Chairman. Is he?
Thank you.
I believe he's still muted.
Hello, Mr. Mancini.
Good evening, Madam Leader. Happy New Year to you and your family.
Same to
Hi,
you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Yep, I guess we're technical difficulties. We got it squared. Great.
Mr.
Good evening,
Mr.
everybody.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if with the committee's permission, at 5:30, if I could just excuse myself to attend a brief matter at the Claims Committee and come right back, if that'd be okay with the committee?
I think so, yep. And if we have any legal outstanding questions, when you come back, I'll have the clerk give them to you and then you can answer them, okay?
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yep, who is Councilwoman Anthony? There you go.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I just also wanted to let you know I'm going to be leaving the meeting at 5:30 to attend claims and pending suits.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll try to make sure we give you an opportunity to ask if you have some questions you want to ask, we'll get you in first so you can ask them, Councilwoman, okay?
Thank you.
All right, great. So let's begin this meeting. It's welcome everybody once again. Good evening. It's hopefully everybody's healthy and safe. Happy New Year, and hopefully the upcoming year will be better for everybody, especially health-wise. With that, I'd like to begin this meeting. It's the City Council Committee on Finance. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Chairman Igliozzi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Present.
Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Yes, I am present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam. Let's begin the process. If we could take, waive the readings of item 1, 2, and make a motion to continue the next, continue according to the next Council of Finance meeting.
So moved.
By Vice Chair, do I have a second?
Second.
By Councilman Anthony. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
With that, let's take item number 4, Madam Clerk.
Discussion relative to the administration's unilateral decision to recertify homestead properties during a pandemic.
All right, thank you. With that, I think we have people from administration. We have Mr. Mancini, Ms. Silveria. I believe we have Ms. Tax Assessor Parry. I believe, right? Do we have them?
Yes,
so, and who else? Yep. Let's swear all those folks in. And then before we do that, let me acknowledge that President Sabina Matos is with us. Councilwoman Miller is with us. The new Chief of Staff, PJ Fox, is with us. Jimmy Lombardi, our Treasurer. Gina Costa, our Internal Auditor. Councilman Espinal is present. And of course, Ken Cheverini, our City Solicitor. I think I have everybody. I think it's Councilwoman LaFortune also. Okay, with that, could you swear the individuals in?
Raise your hand, right hand, please. Please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony and perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yeah.
Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer in the City of Providence.
Elise Parry, City Assessor.
I
Okay.
think Ms. Silveria is mute.
Sarah's next. She's muted.
Sorry, Sarah Silveria, Finance Director.
Okay. All right. I think that's it, right? And we also have Billy Kepner, by the way, Deputy Chief of Staff. So let's do this first. Very quickly, I guess it's going to be maybe the tax assessor and Mr. Mancini, whoever wants to do it. Can you first tell us what is the homestead exemption? What does it do? And then explain to us what was the genesis to begin the process to recertify the last couple of months. So why don't you start off, who wants to take that, Madam Assessor or Mr. Mancini? Mr. Mancini?
Mr. Chair, if I may, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee, and Happy New Year to you and your committee and members of the council. Our city assessor, Elise Parry, will answer all those questions associated with the homestead and office operations, and myself and Ms. Silverio will be here to answer all questions associated with the process, in addition to Ms. Parry. So at this point, with your permission, sir, I will defer to the city's tax assessor, Ms. Parry.
All right. Madam Assessor, can you tell us what the homestead exemption is, first of all? And then how, is it presently being applied right now to the present taxes to the people? And then explain to us what was the genesis to begin this new recertification process. Madam Assessor?
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, members. The homestead exemption is afforded to residents in the city of Providence who claim or prove eligibility for residency. When they own a property in the city, a residential property, they're eligible to receive up to 40% off on their tax bill. Effectively, in past years, it was an owner-occupied rate versus a non-owner occupied rate, and we have since gone back to a homestead exemption, which is 40% off of their tax bill. Currently, there are, in the current 2020 tax roll, there were just over 18,000 residents that were claiming this exemption on their property. Again, this is a 40% reduction in their real estate residential taxes. The existing ordinance requires residents to apply for the date of assessment, December 31st, by March 15th each year on their tax bill. We started this process, or looking into recertifying this process, almost a year now, and then developing the tools to be able to do it electronically, in addition to the already existing paper application.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Anthony, do you have I want to make sure you have an opportunity, so I'd like you to, if you have your questions or some questions right now, I'd like to give you the opportunity to ask and get them answered. You're muted too, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Perry. So I just, so we have to do this. I should know I do own my property and occupy it. So that's done every year. We have to do this requirement, fulfill this requirement.
So the way the ordinance read, it is an annual submission. However, residents have not been asked or expected to apply each year. Instead, if they received it in a past year, we just keep rolling it forward for them. The last time a recertification was completed was in 2012. So if an ownership didn't change in that time period, we've just maintained the exemption on the property.
Okay, so we just basically, you're trying to figure out, so you're trying to update this and make sure that this is current. Are you planning on doing this every year going forward?
So just speaking back to the last time the certification was done in 2012, I was the city's deputy at the time. There was conversations because of, not that it's necessarily a burden, but it's asking people to comply and to submit information to the city. And because of the number of applicants that are eligible for this, it's paperwork for roughly 19,000 homes. There were talks of doing this every 3 years, almost on like, the same cycle as a revaluation. So every 3 years, we'll revalue all the properties and we'll make sure, we'll confirm residency. I think that's more realistic. I would just say at this point in time, not doing anything from 2012 up until 2021, I think has just gone too long without. And it really, when you look at the homestead exemption, it is a benefit that it's for our residents. The intended use is a benefit to our residents. I don't want to certify the tax roll knowing that this benefit is going to someone other than a resident. So it is helpful to do it. I would like to hopefully amend the existing ordinance, and maybe going forward, we'll complete it this year and then do it again in 3 years.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. I have more questions regarding the rollout of this, but I just don't know if that's appropriate to get into now.
If you want, I think that's part of it. You can, if you have some questions, I think this is a good time to ask it, because I believe we're all, there's ramifications to where the rollout's applied, there's ramifications in how it applies to our constituents, and then, let's not forget, out of the 18,000 constituents that are all across the city, the ones that miss this opportunity, you won't necessarily hear it or hear their concerns sometimes until after this July 2021, when they issue the new tax bills and they find out that they don't have their homestead anymore, right? So that's where we're trying to get ahead of, if you think about it, what potentially is going to happen come July, August, September of this year, when people realize, oh, I didn't qualify, I didn't get my homestead, why didn't I get,
Yeah.
So we're trying to head off down the path. So I think it is a relevant, this is a good time to ask those questions. So Councilman Anthony.
Well, and I thank you very much, Ms. Perry, for the explanation, because I do agree that, it is quite a lot of time has passed from 2012 to 2018. So I certainly see the need for it. I guess my question is the rollout of this. I have been receiving, oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you how many emails and calls with people that are, it seemed to go out late with the date, right before Christmas, and it was, a certain deadline. People are having a terrible time online meeting these requirements. And I just, even now, after, sending out numerous word letters or trying to answer these questions, I mean, people are still continuing to have trouble. So I guess I'm just going to say, I think it was a surprise to a lot of people. I think it was not rolled out correctly. And I would like to hear from you on those issues, but also how are we going to fix this? I mean, this is still quite a people are just very, very uncertain on what's going on. And there are many, many people that can't do this online. So I'm wondering why we didn't send out, paper, some actual application that people could fill out and mail back. So anyway, those are some of my concerns.
Of course.
Madam Assessor, do you want to answer that? I think, I guess you can start from, you guys said that you started working on it for the past year. So can you now take us through that? And then I think one of the issues that Councilman Anthony mentioned is that everyone was taken by surprise that this was happening, that this was occurring, and then it happened, and then it was actually then mailed out. So can you explain that gap and then take us from that point forward?
Sure. So I'm going to go back even a little bit further, back to 2000. In 2012, when we did this recertification process, we had 18,000 people coming into City Hall, making copies of papers, trying to get duplicate applications, very frustrated. Things had to be notarized, and it was all an in-person, essentially, process. And I took all of those concerns into consideration when trying to develop a better process this time around. There are many applicants. I mean, tonight, there are just over 6,800 successful online submissions now. There are many people that are applying, getting through the process in 2 minutes online. The idea of having an online process was simply to enhance or make it easier for people who were able to apply online. Of course, the paper application we're still accepting, we're still providing to residents. To date, we've mailed about 400 of them out. And about 200 have come back. So they're pretty quick to turn them around and get the information back into our office. But really, we wanted to make sure that, obviously, during a pandemic, we don't want to have 18,000 people in City Hall to reapply for their homestead exemption. So we thought if we can get the majority of people to understand the sense of urgency and applying for this and making sure they're still eligible for this benefit and they can do it online, that's the quickest and best way to do it. Again, not everyone has a computer, and we completely understand that. We had issues initially with the mail, which you mentioned, as did everyone, unfortunately. There were issues with the Postal Service, and yes, they were absolutely delayed. It's odd. We started getting responses in the form as soon as December 8th. And as you know, you do need that PID to log in to create the submission. So it seems like some people were getting them earlier. It kind of just seems like the post office was almost sending them in batches. And the bulk of people, I believe, received them on the 21st and 22nd, the week of Christmas. But the intent was not to create an additional problem on our residents. It was to take the previously approved or adopted method for recertification and enhancing it and making it better. So everything that existed before still exists. They can still do it that way. And we're actually, not requiring it to be notarized, just given the pandemic. They just send in paperwork. And this add-on, this online function was just supposed to be an enhancement for those who they don't make, paper copies or something notarized or bring something down to City Hall. They can just do it from home.
Okay. Council President Matos?
I would like to add to Councilman Anthony's question. The problem that I have with the process is not that it's being done, it's the lack of communication. Just internally within us at the city, communication from the administration to the city council, there was none. We were all surprised with this. The problem that I have with doing this now in this year during a pandemic, when people are dealing with so much already, the level of stress that this is causing to people that don't have access to a computer or that don't have the skills to use a computer or use their smartphone. Still, if you're trying to do this using a smartphone, it's not as easy. It's very difficult, complicated, because you have to pick from that long list of number. So what I'm trying to understand is why they need to do this right now. Why couldn't we wait to do this in another year? And why there was not enough communication, or there was non-communication, especially to the city council, when we are the first one that hear from the public about issues like this.
Madam Assessor? Reply?
So I will say that our office, we went through finance, we went through the administration to let them know we would be doing this process. It was a lengthy process, and I thought was communicated. I apologize that it wasn't communicated directly to the council. I don't know if Larry wants to speak on that.
So thank you, Madam Assessor, and Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Madam President, good evening. We, with all the sincerity in the world, did not intentionally not communicate this to our partners in government. It was a process that was the primary jurisdiction of the finance department through the assessor's office. It was something that hadn't been done in years. It was in the midst of modernizing submissions. I think in any environment, modernizing is good. And with the pandemic, it was an attempt to find a way that could ease the burden of coming to City Hall, without any data that suggests how many people would or would not have access to computer. That's why it was made available for a mobile device. What I learned in this process is that because if you use an Android telephone, cell phone, it doesn't present the same difficulty. It's if you have an iPhone or an Apple phone. Apple has a program that basically changes the way the list appears, making it a little more difficult to access. I don't know how many of those folks had that difficulty. And the truth is, we have worked steadily with taxpayers. We have received a number of calls. Assessor staff has spent whatever time necessary to comfort them. I've been hearing good responses from taxpayers as I check daily with our finance director, Ms. Silveria, and our assessor, Ms. Parry. But the truth is, Madam President, while I appreciate the fact that this is a time that people are going through stress, this would be equivalent to the same thing that if there was any benefit that a taxpayer or a resident was applying for, the eligibility requirements are what they are. We were just trying to make it an easier process, if you will, by doing it online. And it's not meant to be a revenue enhancement as much as it's meant to be a revenue protection. For every homestead exemption that is not eligible, that would mean that the vast majority of taxpayers who are eligible are being properly protected, and we saw that in that light. And yes, the ordinance does speak to certification. The truth is, any new buyer is automatically advised that they need to consider applying for a homestead exemption, and that process has continued and does continue year over year over year. Over the past several years, this process was tied more or less to reval in the reval process every 3 years. If you recall, 2 years ago, in the 18 reval value at December 31, that was the so-called 9-year reval, the so-called knock on every door list and measures of the complete reval. And with that said, this body, this council, given your role in that adoption process, saw fit to enact a 40% homestead exemption vis-a-vis the bifurcated rate. And that was done, and again, as a means to find relief to taxpayers. Ms. Parry, who took employment a year ago, September, one of the first things that she was keenly aware of from her prior employment with Providence and her more recent employment in the city of Woonsocket was a recertification process. But because we had already adopted the levy or had been doing that at that time, she was appointed in September, had made it the mission of the finance department to do that process, to have that process in motion, and that was well underway. And so as we approached March of last year with the closure of city government for the protection of the public and the employees who work in the building, and then as we slowly began to open government again in the summer, this process was in fact planned and it was intended, and there was no intention to exclude knowledge to city council. It is a process that is the purview of the city assessor. I think in the past it's been done more or less routinely when it has been done, and I'm not aware of any time when it was done with or without council participation or council knowledge. I know that the meeting this evening, the meeting notice said unilateral, but Madam President, with all due respect, it wasn't viewed as a unilateral decision as much as it was viewed as an action that was within the purview of the finance department and the tax assessor's office. In fact, a responsibility that we believe had to be done, one that could not be delayed or postponed. So I think what will happen, Madam President, is that this ends up being really a purge of those who are not eligible, and rightfully so, unlike any other purge. If it happens at a time when there is a pandemic, and once again, we are as sympathetic and as compassionate as we are, but you may recall that a year ago, the same thing occurred with the tax sale. Well, a tax sale is one of those tools that are required or allowed by statute or by ordinance. We were sympathetic and compassionate, and we delayed the implementation of the tax sale time being, but we did not cancel it. It was a necessary tool, and as it turned out, the statistics showed that, and even in that regard, the tax sale, that there were only 44 owner-occupied properties that ended up being in the tax sale finally in August, and of those, the vast majority of them, once again, with due respect, were repeat offenders, those who had more or less perpetually fallen into that position. In this regard, I think...
Mr. Mancini?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate a little more of that additional history, but if the fundamental question was about notice, and I just want to say one thing. In the past, unfortunately, I've been on the council a little bit longer than everybody here, and the council was, at least I know my times of being in the finance committee, we would know the reval would come around, we know about the recertification, we would have notices and understanding of that processes were happening, and the administrations, at least past ones, would have always kept the finance committee, the internal auditor, the treasurer, everybody in the loop that's coming because of, and you said something interesting. You said the whole reason is because we need to get this done, we want to be compassionate to the people of Providence, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, the 15 voices that deal with the people on an everyday basis, we're the front line who deal with our constituents literally on a daily basis, the 15 voices that usually past administrations make sure knew this was happening because of the concerns our constituents would have. So we would have answers. For example, when someone would say, you just mentioned about if you have an Apple phone versus a different phone, like all those kinds of answers, we would have all been prepared to deal with those questions with our constituents and where to go to and what to do, versus an entire body branch of government was left out of the loop completely about something as serious as recertification. So I do disagree with you about the past. I do disagree with you. Yes, of course, the tax assessor's job is to get it recertified, but they don't operate in a vacuum when it comes to impacting all our constituents on a daily basis. And in particular, as I mentioned earlier, not now, but this time come July, August, September of this year, we will hear our constituents complaining, I missed my homestead opportunity, what do I do? So, and then all of a sudden, we get those calls, and then we have, by the way, as you know, by the way, the council has the exclusive legal constitutional duty to levy taxes and to grant homesteads and et cetera. So we are an integral part of that process. So I just want to say, before you get any more into that, that was I think what the president was talking about. So I want to go back to the president, then we have Councilman LaFortune, and then we have Councilwoman Miller. So I want to get, and Councilman Ryan, then Miller. Council President, do you have any further questions?
I just want to add that I was saying that the level of stress that this is adding to the constituents, especially senior citizens who I've been in communication with, they feel stressed. They feel that I have to respond to this. If not, my taxes are going to go up right away. They really don't understand what this process means. There was not enough communication. There should have been social media, all the medias that the city uses all the time. It should have been communicated better. And on top of that, the application should have been also translated into other languages. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilwoman LaFortune, and then I have Councilwoman Councilwoman Miller, then Councilwoman Ryan. Councilwoman LaFortune?
Thank you, Chair. I share Councilwoman, Council President, as well as Councilwoman Anthony's concerns about the rollout. I will say that I'm privileged to have access to the internet and was able to do it online, but I did get calls from my constituents. In fact, a constituent knocked on my door and, couldn't really understand what the letter meant. And so Anne doesn't have computer or internet at her house. She's elderly. So my question to you is, what are you going to do going forward to fix this? So will you further extend the deadline perhaps to the end of January or perhaps February? 2, is it possible to send out a batch of applications? Remember, for this year, when people, the Secretary of State, in order for people to send out their mail-in ballots, people got the application to be able, every single voter did receive an application to apply for a mail-in ballot. So perhaps one solution is to actually send the applications a paper form to everyone. If it can be in multiple languages, that would be great, because we do have people who speak multiple languages, French, Portuguese, Southeast Asian languages, and other Asian languages. So if there's a way to do that. And also with that package, if there could be a clear explanation of what this is, because not everyone is following, politics very closely, and there's people who, and although we've communicated stuff to folks, but there's still some confusion about what this homestead means, right? And so if there's a way to send out some with that application that provides a more detailed explanation of what that is, I think that would be helpful, and maybe a return stamped envelope, if possible, if you can find one for that, so that folks who are unable to get a call can stick it in, once they fill it out, stick it in the mail, and perhaps have someone, perhaps give the option for people to call 311, and there could be a dedicated group of people on 311 that can walk people through the whole process if they're having trouble filling out the application via paper or online. So just thinking about some solutions and what are you guys going to do going forward? Because we could talk about the problems all day, but you still have to get done.
So thank you, Councilwoman LaFortune, and thank you, Councilman LaFortune. And I will let the assessor pick up from here, but I do know that we have already announced that there is a extension of the submission deadline, I believe, to February 12th. And Ms. Parry can speak further about other aspects of what has been done to accommodate the taxpayers, including sending out where appropriate or where available, written applications to assist in that regard. Ms. Parry, if you would be happy to.
Please let Ms. Parry, if that's right, Mr. Mancini, if she can speak, then it'll be easier. Ms. Parry, do you have a corrective action plan, or do you want it, at this time? And you just heard Councilwoman Fortune, some of her suggestions. What's your corrective action plan at this time? Is it simply just to extend it to February? Can you please elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So as of now, we've extended until February. Once February deadline hits, which will be that Friday, the 12th, I believe, we will be spending that weekend doing an analysis to identify those applicants who have not yet reapplied. Those applicants will be re-notified via mail. And instead of just the notice, they would be receiving a copy of the paper application. We're hoping to be far exceeding 50% at that point through online submissions and paper submissions to the office. But that has been the plan all along. Just going back to 2012, there were 3 notices that were mailed out. So the initial mailing, a second reminder notice, and then a third postcard mailing before the bills went out to just, again, remind constituents. In addition to just notifying those that haven't reapplied, we are going to go back through the mail that gets returned. I'll be getting mail back probably within the next week from the post office of mail that was not able to be delivered to the resident's home. Those ones, it might be a good indication that either they're no longer residing there, but again, a second attempt will still be made to notify them to reapply for the homestead exemption. By ordinance, they have until March 15th to apply. So what we'll be doing is again, going through all of that data as it comes in and trying to identify and reach out additionally to taxpayers to explain the process, the importance of the process, and hopefully getting them to apply prior to the bills going out.
Okay. Councilwoman Miller?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to, I can't agree enough with some of the concerns that have been raised and, some of the potential solutions. I'm glad to hear that February 12th is not the end all, right? That there'll still be another opportunity for folks who haven't responded. But, Mr. Mancini, one thing that you said was, that this was a routine matter. And in a lot of ways, I agree with that, right? I agree that a recertification process is good for the city. I think there's nothing routine about this year. I think we all know that. I think we all feel that. I'm still wondering about why we are pushing through to have this for this year. I mean, I think that, so I've heard from, most recently, I heard from a constituent who lives in a home whose partner just died. The house was in the partner's name, right? So our constituents' families are being utterly disrupted by COVID. And I think that this is not an appropriate time to start a new process, however good or valid or important the process is. I just think that even with the extension, I just think this is going to be a big burden. So that's one thing I want to raise. My other question is, okay, so if folks miss this deadline and they miss the second notice and they miss whatever, right? Because again, families are all over the place right now. And I'm not sure that they will be in a place to receive mail in February or in March. And they get a tax bill that shows, one, I guess I'm worried that some folks won't even know, right? Because their taxes are handled through their mortgage provider. So they may not even be aware of not getting the homestead exemption. But 2, what's the remedy if they are and they get and they don't realize that this has happened until they get a tax bill? What's the remedy then?
So, Mr. Chairman, would you prefer that the assessor answer that question? Because I believe I do know the answer to that. But
as long as it's simple, short and concise. I don't need a.
I believe the assessor will testify. I believe the assessor will testify, Councilwoman Miller, that there is after tax bill mailing remedy for a taxpayer who has missed the application for whatever reason, no fault of their own or information that was not sufficiently processed, and the assessor has the ability at their level to correct the bill and change the bill by virtue of an abatement at the assessor level. But I would prefer that the assessor give you that testimony as well.
Well,
Madam
Madam Assessor, if you're not going to say anything different than Mr. Mancini said, just say yes so we can move on. I don't need,
Mr.
we don't need the
Mancini.
same thing twice. Is that correct? All right. Councilman Miller, do you have a follow-up? Okay. Council Vice Chair Ryan, Majority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments and questions. I guess for me, I absolutely affirm or agree with the concerns expressed by my council colleagues. But first and foremost, it was a shocker for me as a council person, and my other colleagues feel the same. And that goes to the fact that there was no collaboration between the finance department and the council regarding what was going to happen. The council president aptly presented that we're on the front lines, we're answering questions, we didn't have the information we needed to answer questions and truly be a partner in helping to accomplish this task, which we are often called upon to do willingly. So, you know, I heard the assessor talk about a plan. I would like to ask that plan be presented to our chief of staff so it could be distributed, what the contingency plan is, what the process going forward is, and what accommodations will be made for people who do not get notice or have not taken the action that was asked of them. Also, one thing I'd like to add on is I've had a number of constituents say that they've gone through the process, they haven't gotten a response, so they don't know. They're kind of in out there in space. They don't know if they accomplished what they had hoped to accomplish. So I'm not sure what your contingency plan, and you don't need to answer now, but those are concerns. But my biggest issues are why now? Why during a pandemic? It makes no sense at all. We've gone through this budget year on a month-to-month basis, spending our dollars, scarce dollars that we were very unsure of being able to maintain operations on a month-to-month basis. Why did an effort like this happen? And I guess that is what I'm having a problem reconciling. Councilwoman Miller talked about the pain that our residents, our families, and so many are experiencing. This letter went out just before Christmas. People were upset that they went through Thanksgiving. They couldn't be with their families. They couldn't celebrate their holidays as they typically do. And then they get this letter in the mail. I heard from a constituent that had her identity compromised in a prior city process. And she's very fearful of uploading any documents to the internet, not understanding or appreciating the security of her documents when she did that. So that got me to thinking, and I don't think it's even been addressed tonight, is the security of the process. And Mr. Mancini spoke about it working on an Android, not working on an Apple. And that to me is very concerning, because when you're building a process and you're building a fulfillment program, you're basically building a process that can accommodate multiple means of response, whether someone has an Android, has an iPhone, has an iPad, has a computer system, what model, what versions. And you're basically building something to the lowest common denominator, which in this instance would really be a mail system. And someone already articulated, if we were mailing a notice out, why didn't we include a paper application? If we were paying to mail something, why weren't we articulating on all of the exemptions that our residents are privy to or would be privy to? senior exemptions, veterans exemptions. I have people calling me and saying, what is a homestead exemption? That homestead is defined by us very commonly, particularly in the last budget season, but I don't think people generally understand what homestead exemption is. And I spent a good deal of time explaining, well, it's your owner occupied exemption. So, the message itself, the vehicle itself was very, very questionable. But who produced who created the program that was utilized or relied upon? If I could ask the assessor, Madam Assessor, could you respond to that, please?
Sure. We worked with our IT department in Providence.
So it was an internally produced procedure.
Yes.
What types of and was that contemplated? Or were there contingency plans built for different?
The security, the data itself is secure. If you received a confirmation email from the city, we would provide a copy of your information that you submitted to us.
Who holds the documents? Where do we store them?
They're stored on a city-owned server.
When was the last time you did penetration testing on that server?
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
Is there an IT person from the administration who can? I mean, I guess where I'm going with that is, to me, if we didn't, so it's homegrown, we built it ourselves, it clearly has issues. It is not an easy system to navigate. I tried it on 3 different devices, and 2 devices got hung up. My 3rd device, I was able to get through, but I got no confirmation that anything was received. So my own personal status is unknown, which leads to another question that somebody else had raised before. What's the avenue for those folks who think they applied and didn't? What's your, how is that going to be handled down the road? Is that going to be, you've got to go through the council to get an exception? How is that? What was your plan on that?
No, so the confirmation emails, we did test that the confirmation emails are working. And we can work with the IT director to confirm that, but we have been testing, we've been responding. You get a confirmation email upon submitting the application electronically. And then once it's approved by the office, you also get a second email, a confirmation email. Looking forward, for those who do not apply, our office does have a mechanism in place to produce abatement, to adjust that bill for them after the fact. Again, we're working as quickly as we can to approve them, but applications come in the portal several every minute. So we're working through as quick as we can to process them so they get notification. I'll personally do a check myself as to why your confirmation email was not received. And again, I can reissue a confirmation email to anyone that's called. There have been a couple of people that said, oh, I submitted it, but I didn't get anything. And when, we go into the application, well, they typed their email address wrong, or, simple little mistakes. So then we just re-forward it to the correct address for them. Today we had some calls from the council office where they said they couldn't get through. And I respectfully asked, do you mind telling me what line they're calling? We had 2 active calls in the portal. I had 6 agents available to take calls. So we're trying to address every concern, and feel free as council members to forward them directly to me as the assessor. I will make sure that my staff is tasked with responding to these people to make sure everyone is comfortable with the process. I understand it's asking them to do something which is out of the norm. But again, at the end of the day, for their benefit, to make sure that they're the only ones for this benefit. It's something that as residents should be receiving and no one else.
And then, thank you very much. The other question is, it goes to the notice and why now. The first we heard about it was when our residents were getting these letters delivered to them. Why was it not brought up in our budget discussions? Why did we not have a conversation about the plan to do this year?
I'll be honest with you, Councilwoman. This is a process that should be done every year in the assessor's office. It's not out of the norm. And unfortunately, I can't speak to what's been done by the past two assessors that have been here over the past years. As an assessor, it's my duty to make sure exemptions are valid and those receiving them are eligible to receive them. So I don't have a better answer for it. It's just second nature to me to go through this process. It's a requirement of duty to make sure it's completed.
And who do you report to directly in the city?
Sarah and Larry.
Were they aware of your plan? Did they approve
Yes.
your plan?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to send the plan to the council office first and foremost, and that will include the contingency plan for, dealing with people who haven't connected. The other thing I'd like you to send is information about the IT system, or from IT, the security of residents' personal documents. What measures have been taken? When was the last time we did penetration testing to make sure that we're protecting the personal identifiable information of our residents? And then the only other thing I'd like to get back to is why not take an opportunity to notify, Mr. Mancini spoke about, it's a benefit. We're, telling people that they get a 40% discount that, why did we not take the opportunity to inform people of other benefits, other exemptions that might be available to them? Why was it strictly solely about homestead?
The majority of residents in the city are eligible for a homestead, not necessarily an elderly exemption. It's just such a smaller pool of eligible applicants. And I think the intent was to keep this process as straightforward and as simple as possible. So notifying them of, hey, you have to recertify your homestead, do X, Y, and Z, but also you might have a social security disability, you might have an elderly, do you have a veterans exemption? I think it might have been too overwhelming.
It might have been helpful if, and here's where I'm going with that, it might have been helpful if we identified each, you obviously have the address, the plat, and the lot, and you know that they've gotten in homestead in the past. I'm thinking your IT department could easily have identified what exemptions they had, or they have, and put that in their letter so it was customized. We customized the name, address, and gave them a PIN number or whatever the number was called. But why wouldn't we take the opportunity? Because everybody is asking me about their exemptions and I don't know what they are. The lines going into your office apparently were extremely busy. And I had neighbors saying that they just couldn't get through, that they, threw up their hands because they couldn't get through. So it's just, to me, it's just a very disappointing execution of a process that has caused grief and aggravation for so many. And that's where I'm at on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Then we have Councilman Castillo, and then Councilman Fennell, and then I have the treasurer and the general auditor. Councilwoman Castillo? Councilman, you're muted.
Okay, that is confused a lot of people. I receive a lot of phone calls because they say, oh, I have my own step already. So why I had to do it again? Because I live in my house and people don't understand. And also I believe that's a lot of requirement, like, like we can provide a lot of information. Even me, I can go in and they want to go to the city hall to bring, the paperwork they have. Especially me, I have, like, I live in the house. It's my house, but we are like 3 units, and my insurance don't come to any names because we divided the bill and pay the bill together, but it's any names there. How I can prove that's my house and I pay my insurance and everything. I believe that's a lot of requirement. And agree with my college, like, this is not the time. It's not the moment. We are like crazy moment. and you decided to do this in this year. So I believe, you know, you need to take this away, because a lot of my constituents, they can do it by computer. They don't know how, you know, I don't have fax to fax the paper over there. And that's confused. You know, some people say, oh no, I received a letter too, but I don't have to do it because I already have my homestead. So you guys, I believe, you know, it's not information. Take that letter away to everybody. And it's not the time. It's a difficult time for everybody right now. And some people can be available to provide that all information you request for. So I'm really disappointed. I don't agree. And I believe it's not the time. And a lot of them, a lot of people in here, even they don't know how they can do it, how they can be in the computer. And a lot of people try and they fail. So this thing has to go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Espinal? Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity, and also to the members of the Finance Committee and my dear colleagues. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the previously stated reasons as to why perhaps this should not go forward. I do understand the need and the reasons why we need to recertify the homestead. I think it's a good thing. But I just want to add that to date, over 95 people in over 95,000 residents of Rhode Island have tested positive for COVID-19. And out of those 95,000, over 20,000 are Providence residents. And over 1,800 individuals have lost their lives in the state of Rhode Island. And out of those, over 400 have been Providence residents. So COVID-19 has had a dramatic and horrific impact in Providence residents and the taxpayers. So although I do understand the reason why this needs to get done, I think the timing is wrong. It's off. And adding to perhaps a solution to this, it will make sense that we take this year to get things in order and perhaps make this effective as of next year. Again, I think the timing is off. It's wrong to do it at this time. So my only question to the assessor would be, are we losing anything by prolonging this to another year? We already went through 8 years that we did not do this. And we didn't have, and we were not living the situation that we have today and that we are living today. So will we be at a major loss if we say this year we give an opportunity to taxpayers to bring their accounts up to date and to submit whatever paperwork they need to submit, and we can make it effective for next year? So that's my question. What are we losing by not doing it that way and thinking of the taxpayers and their hardship that they're enduring during this difficult time? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Assessor, do you want to answer that, or with the Finance Director or CFO?
That's fine. I can't speak to the potential monetary loss of not doing this or gain to not doing this year. I will say my intention of completing this now, despite COVID occurring, and I understand the impact it's having on our residents, my intent is solely to make sure that I have a tax certification that I can stand by and I can sign with confidence. Knowing that these records haven't been validated or verified in many, many years, I have great concern with. And again, that's my personal opinion as the tax assessor.
Right, and again, they have not been done for 8 years. I think that if we go another year, I don't think it'll make any major difference, really.
Thank you, Councilman Espinal. Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have the Treasurer, then the Internal Auditor, then Councilwoman Miller. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just have a few questions in regards to recertification. Do you believe that recertification means that somebody has to provide all of the documents? Or is there any way, for example, of doing some type of a negative certification or a test check? Because to be honest with you, if you were to recertify every year, I believe that, in my opinion, would be a complete nightmare on every aspect. We'd be chasing money, trying to get refunds, looking for things. I mean, so I guess if you can answer that, is there other ways to recertify?
Yes, so we did talk to the law department about this. The way our existing ordinance reads, a declaration must be made by the applicant. It has to be evidenced by some form of proof, which is, why at this time we're accepting a license as their form of proof. The ordinance does go on to speak about the car registrations. However, after having conversations with the DMV, it's been confirmed that with their system, they link licenses and owners of licenses to their registrations now. So if you update your license, your registration automatically gets updated. So in our mind, if we're receiving a copy or seeing a copy of a driver's license with the Providence address, it's safe to assume their car is also registered there. But as the ordinance is currently written, it has to be a declaration under oath, and it has to be evidenced by some form of proof.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make this a smaller issue than I hope that it is. So you do automatically revoke a homestead on every sale. Is that correct?
We do.
Okay. So what would trigger, and obviously the obvious one would be, what would trigger someone losing their homestead? Obviously moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but
if we're notified.
Right. But so I'm asking you, what would so the vast majority of people who have a homestead, who I'm going to say, do you check death records?
We do.
Who haven't died,
Mm-hmm.
who haven't not sold a house, the vast majority of those should be okay. So you're up in, I'm going to say in the 90 percentile?
That we're not sure of.
Okay.
So I say that because over the years, we'll have a couple, a husband and wife, who own a triple decker in Providence. That was their first home. They buy it in their 20s as an investment property. 4 years later, they buy a single family home. They retain ownership of that triple decker. That triple decker still has the homestead exemption on it. They come in with a new, address on the license, apply for the homestead on the single family. And yeah, because that triple decker, that 3-family house never sold, we removed an exemption. As far as we're concerned, they still live in the property.
Could we do a license match? Homeowner versus license match? I mean, I'm trying to say that are there other ways of doing this without hurting, I'm going to use the 90% that are properly getting the homestead.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't keep things like owners, driver's license numbers in the system. We don't track that data. We don't maintain that data.
The registry would probably be cooperative in doing a match like that.
Right, but we can't link a person on a deed to a driver's license.
Okay.
We have our motor vehicle records aren't linked to the house, unfortunately.
Right. I just see this as being extremely difficult to do. I think that the elderly, I mean, I have to be honest with you. I did my mother's. One is the answers that are given on the computer are not all inclusive. For example, all the deeds aren't there. My mother has a homestead. I mean, a life estate. That's not a checkbox that you can check. I don't, there's no way, I had problems doing it. And I did it on a regular computer. It's impossible. I mean, she's 92. I mean, even if she was 62, I think that it would be a problem. I just see that there's problems on a very short notice that I think can be resolved in other manners by test checking, by doing other type of analysis. And I'm not saying you're going to get every one of them. You're not. I mean, even if you do the documents, we're not. But if we're test checking every year, you know, we get all the the deed transfers, we get all of the death notices, you know, and we're test checking the other ones. I don't know. And maybe even just an affidavit, but I understand that it does say that documentary evidence has to be provided, but I'm just trying to say, I see this as a big issue. And as I've been here 22 years, I've never seen, I mean, there might be a recertification every so often, but it's never annually or even every 3 years or every 5 years. The length is a long time. And I think they jump through every hoop in the world to make sure that they don't cut somebody off that should be getting it. Just my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Internal Auditor, and then Councilwoman Miller. Internal Auditor?
I was kind of going down the same path as Jimmy. Who received the notifications to recertify? Current homeowner occupied?
So all residents that are currently receiving the homestead were notified. It was just over 18,000. The only ones that were not notified, if they just applied in 19 or 20, and we have obviously their information readily available in the office, we weren't asking them to recertify because they just claimed the homestead. Anyone that was on there from 2018 and prior were asked to recertify.
Okay, is there any penalty for someone who falsifies their records or who is receiving dual homestead?
If we find someone that was receiving a dual homestead, by law, we can go back 6 years and adjust their tax bill. To my knowledge, we've only ever made the adjustment on the existing year. So if we caught a mistake, you know, this husband and wife had it on 2 properties, we would adjust the current year bill to reflect the non-owner occupied status.
Okay. Well, I just came from vacation and actually it was at my brother's and he received his annual homestead certification. It was a certification from the tax assessor outlining and defining what a homestead is, and they made it their responsibility in accordance with law to report any divorce, anything for the sale of the home, and they tied it to their license and their registration. So what happens if you have dual residency? What if I do 6 in 6 months, but my car's registered in Florida? I mean, there's so many other things to do that you can, I thought this was very well done. So he never has to submit anything else. Once you have your homestead exemption, you have it. But the assessor every year mails them that postcard for them to confirm that this is accurate or they're violating the law. And so no one has to annually keep submitting this paperwork. That was just, I thought it was great. I mean, I would love to share it with you because I was really impressed. I was like, oh, we're going through this now and it's the complete opposite. And he said, oh no, once we do it, we're done. And it becomes their responsibility and they are risking violating the law. So and you can do that annually. You know what I mean? Rather than asking them to keep submitting paperwork annually.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there was one other comment, but I can't remember. So, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Madam Assessor, I would just say, so you had already mentioned previously that you thought there might be changes to the ordinance that would be helpful to make. I still haven't heard anyone explain the urgency of doing this year. And I've heard a lot of council people saying that it doesn't make sense this year, that there's a way to, there's clearly been process problems. There's clearly overwhelming obstacles for folks to getting this done. And I'm not sure why we're stuck on doing it this year versus letting this process be a segue into a 2-year recertification. Perhaps we need to revisit the ordinance. Perhaps we need to make changes to the ordinance to do the process that the internal auditor mentioned, right? I agree. Having to submit documents every single year doesn't make sense. Not going to work for the long term. And I would love to see just a little bit more thought about the urgency for moving forward with this plan right now.
I understand that people were having concerns or issues with applying electronically on the computer. That was fully anticipated. And again, that paper application process is still available for folks. It's not to say that there's this urgency to do it this year, or it should have been done last year, or should be done next year. I think regardless of the timing, it's asking constituents to do something out of the norm. So regardless of the timing, I think there are always going to be questions resulting from the community. I will say, as someone who was here in 2012, that the questions are far, far less and far fewer than what they were in 2012. I understand there was a period in the office where people couldn't get through, but we are working through that and in addressing all the concerns, all the issues. And quite honestly, I think it's just a matter of making sure that our records are accurate. As the person who has to sign that tax certification each year, I wasn't confident in signing, not knowing when these records have been updated. So again, it's not that I'm picking a pandemic to address this. It's my duty as the assessor to make sure that our records are accurate. And again, it's a benefit to our residents, to our citizens that are entitled to this, and we want to make sure they're going to continue receiving it, and that only they should be receiving this benefit. It's a benefit that they are eligible for and no one else. So I don't want to knowingly give it to someone who's not eligible any longer. And now, and during a pandemic, I think it's more important than ever to make sure our records are accurate and that benefits are only given to those who are entitled to them.
Okay. Councilwoman Ryan?
I just wanted, while Councilor Miller was speaking, it reminded me of one of my constituents told me that the lines were jammed for days. And then when I pursued an answer to that, I was told that we had trouble with our phone lines and that we had to call the phone company in to help us get them operating again. Did the phone lines come down because of the high demand or the high call volume?
We're not sure why the calls actually came down, but cops have to come in and get our calls rerouted. We ended up adding 2 additional city cell phones. That calls were getting routed to cell phones as well. So we're not sure exactly what caused the problem. From our understanding, it wasn't isolated to just the assessor's office. I think it was just a Cox issue, but it had since been resolved. There were 2 days of spotty issues with the phones.
Okay, does that happen? Has that happened frequently? I've been a council person now for a number of years, and I'm unaware of any phone lines coming down, any city phone lines not being functional or being brought down by high volume. So
I'm not aware of it either. Okay.
All right, so then that was the case. And then my other question was relative, you talked about staffing. Is your office fully staffed? Do you have people in the office on regular business hours? You do?
We do.
How many staffers are in your office during business hours?
We operate on 2 shifts. We have a total of 15 staff members. Half the staff works on Monday, Tuesday, and the other half of the staff works on Wednesday and Thursday. On the upper floors, but half and half. We split it up.
Okay, well, I'm very concerned. I remain concerned that this appears to be some heroic effort with a homegrown system that was built to try to receive electronic certification. I think that I think we could have done a better job in planning on building contingency systems for high volume calls, on having better communication all along. And I guess I'm at the place, Mr. Chairman, where I'm questioning what the council can do as a body to try to ease the pain that is already been caused. I also have a question as, you're talking about 18,000 residents out there that got this letter. How about the people that are deserving of a homestead exemption, but don't even know it exists. They probably know now, which is probably why you have so many phone lines ringing. But did we mail to the entire population that we should have? I just think we need to revisit the entire process at this point. And, I think it was great that the mayor extended the deadline, but it's still a deadline and it's still stressful. It's still a cause for grief and aggravation. I just don't know if we should extend it to next year and build a new system, build a new mousetrap, and look at the ordinance and see if we can't come up with a user-friendly way of getting our records in order. And I do think that there's a method or the potential for doing some automation or some automated checks and verifications. As the treasurer stated, I know for a fact that our registrations are tied. We charge people taxes for their automobiles, so we have registration information. It's tied to where they live. I think that we can do work on the back end, as our auditor has expressed. There's got to be a better process, and I think it is incumbent upon us to try to make it as streamlined and as efficient and as painless as possible. And now is not the time to be introducing a convoluted recertification process. And maybe every time we mail to our residents, we take an opportunity of, are you aware that you have an exemption? I think we just need to be able to be a little bit more effective in our communications because, I don't think this, I don't think we're accomplishing what we hope to or what was hoped to be accomplished. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just very quickly, and then I have the President and Councilman Espinal and Mr. Treasurer. You mentioned that, I just want to clarify something. In the actual ordinance that we're talking about, that ordinance dealt with actually before we had a homestead exemption. Then it was taken away under the, I think, Tavares administration. And then this council created the bifurcated rate and brought it back last year, right? In order to give further relief to our homeowners. When I look at the ordinance, I don't see the ordinance is referencing the event that happened back in 2011, 2012. So it doesn't say annually you recertify, that's the first thing. But what I'd like to do is have the city solicitor, I know you probably can't, but I'd like him to look at this, and I need him to review this. The other question is, Madam Assessor, who in the law department did you work with specifically with this project?
Specifically Nick Poulos and Lisa Fries. The homestead eligibility section of our levy ordinance reflects the date of assessment each year is December 31st, and then an application has to be made by March 15th. So it was the legal opinion that this declaration would be made annually based on
That's fine. And if you have it written, I asked the city solicitor, can you get a copy of that legal opinion?
Yes, I will.
So, and I just want, and I have a few questions, but I'll let the folks ask, and I'll try to leave mine to the end. But, so Madam President, you have a follow-up, and I believe Councilman Espinal has a follow-up. I saw his hand up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I actually lowered my hand. Leader Ryan actually addressed my concern. Thank you.
Okay.
So you to President Matos.
Thank you.
Councilman.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to tie it in the conversation that Councilor Miller had and Leader Ryan also alluded to that. Why do we have to do this year? Why I'm requesting of the administration to change the timeline onto next year for this process to be completed. Okay, you already got a lot of it done. A lot of individuals are doing it. electronically, the one that have access to the computers to do it. The ones that have access to a photocopy machine to copy and send it to you. But why can we just extend the deadline until next year? So whoever you get coming through right now, fine. But let's take away that pressure that people are feeling right now that they have to comply for this year.
So, administration from Madam Assessor to the Finance Director, CFO, would you like to, do you have a reply to that inquiry by the Madam President?
Let the assessor answer first, and then I'll complete it.
All right, Madam Assessor, do you have a response?
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, as the responsible person for signing that tax certification each year. It's tough to sign off on something you know isn't accurate. And that's my only reservation. Again, it's not to say, oh, it's a pandemic, I don't want to do it. But I do feel it's my duty as the assessor to make sure our records are up to date and accurate. Again, I can't speak to what's been done in the past, but know that as the assessor in the city of Providence, I take my position very, very seriously. And if I'm not confident in signing off on something, I don't want to turn that over to you guys to approve a budget based on it. Again, it's just, I'd like to know that my records are accurate. That's my only.
Thank you. I have a follow-up. If everybody can answer a couple of follow-ups. First of all, I want to say this really quickly on, I want to say that it's really interesting that we've had finance meetings for the past, during this whole COVID crisis. And I want you to know, Madam Assessor, and I really don't lay the responsibility on you. Let's talk about the notice and the interaction. All due respect, I am somewhat dismayed by the finance director, who was part and parcel to this process for the past year, and of course, the CFO. You folks have come before this finance committee numerous times, hours on hours on end, and reported on all sorts of different elements of the city's budget and city's situation. And not once did you mention to the finance committee, or to the council, or to the financial team, that you were in the process and actually working on this process, in this case, your assessor, who, as you know, finance director, you appoint per the city charter, right? And not once did anybody mention that this process was occurring. And the interesting thing, and I was going to say something, I have gone through several of these recertifications because I've been in this long, and the funny thing is every time, whether the rollout is good or bad, there are always these outstanding questions our constituents always have, and they're very similar to what's happening here. The difference back then, at least a few of the times that I was involved with, is the council was aware of it, part and parcel, and there was preparation and notice to the public, and we did everything we could to explain to our folks and our constituents. So I want you to know that I lay the responsibility of not giving proper notice or giving full disclosure on the doorstep of the finance director and the CFO on this matter. So I want you, Madam Assessor, I didn't lay it on you, I laid it on them too. I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, because that gives me great pause. And that also shows that this claim of communication and working together isn't always a two-way street, is it? That's the first thing. The second thing is you mentioned about you're going by this 2012. Last year we brought back the homestead exemption, right? And and we used some process then to allow those folks to get that homestead, right? And that was fine. So then you said you sent out 18,000 notices. Well, what about people who do? Is it just, you just sent 18,000 notices to people who are presently receiving the homestead? That's what you said? So, and people that might have just moved into the city a year ago or 2 years ago might not be in that 18,000 member group. Is that correct, Madam Assessor?
That is correct, but as new owners, they do get a notice from our office with the homestead application asking them to apply.
No, I'm with you. I recognize that. I want to make sure I said. The next thing is that I find it hard to believe it was 2012, but the next thing is that as you will go, it seems like there's two processes, two tracks. You have a written process and you have a internet interaction process, right? The question I have is, I've seen the internet process, and I haven't seen the written process, the paperwork you mentioned, but can I ask you, the one thing I didn't understand was, and this is a little bit dovetail what the vice chair was talking about, is it said it looked like it was mandatory that you had to give the city your email address and your telephone number. What I've seen in the past, unfortunately, past administrations, which they have utilized that information for particular purposes, whether to use it for political advantages, or use it for selling, et cetera. My question is, why would a constituent have to give that specific information in order to get their homestead? Next thing is I have concern is the VIN numbers, which I get what you're trying to do, but they give you a driver's license, okay? If you're asking for the homestead exemption, what does that have to do? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't we phasing out the car tax issue? Right? And isn't that car tax, question is, do you still need people's VIN numbers on their cars for their car tax bill? And if so, isn't that a separate conversation? I'm trying to understand, you're asking for a lot of information. Some of my constituents don't have email addresses, by the way. Some don't want to give their cell numbers to the city. There's a reason why. And they wouldn't be able to go through that process. So those things I concern about the protection aspect that the vice chair was talking about, which is what protects that aspect that makes sure it doesn't get sold or used for political purposes? Let's call it like it is. What's better than having 18,000 Providence residents have to give you their email address and personal cell phone numbers? I can't think of one politician I know of who would not jump at the chance to accumulate to acquire that information. So it's just something that gives me concern. The other thing is you mentioned about the law department. You've heard this evening about that. You heard about the iPhone. You heard about the other phone. You heard about email, internet, etc. I guess you also have to scan your driver's license and scan your registration and then send it in. So, and you mentioned that on the internet process, you will get an email. If you give them an email, you get an email confirmation. But if you don't give an email, it won't process it because it's a required field. That's the first thing. But in the paper one, if someone just chooses to do the paper process, what gives them confirmation to the paper process that the city received it? Is it when they find their tax bill the following fiscal year and they go, oh, gee, I sent it in, but the city didn't get it? So I just think that what Council Collins is saying is that there's something to be, there's pause and there's cause going on, right? Or there's cause for pause, right? But the other thing is, what empowers you, assessor, is, of course, city ordinances. And city ordinances are promulgated by the city council, let's say the branch of government. So that process that you feel that this would have to be certified, et cetera, well, just like we've done what? We've had a moratorium on evictions. We've had a moratorium on all sorts of things in the city, left and right? And under this COVID situation, there's been so many exceptions to these rules that are going on. I mean, look what's going on right now. We're having a meeting through the telecommunications process versus live and in person. Those are exceptions, right? So I would ask that I think maybe it's something that I look to the finance director, by the way, in particular, right? And it's your role that you're hearing our concerns. You're hearing our constituents' concerns. You're hearing the council's concerns. Now, I understand sometimes people may not like a council person, may not like how they operate, how they act, but that council person is a duly elected official. They represent approximately thousands of people. By the way, they represent almost 16,000 people, approximately, I think now, right? So they are giving a voice to the voiceless. They're telling you a concern. So what I think we should consider doing is bring you back next week, and you put together what is a comprehensive corrective action plan to address the laundry list of concerns my council colleagues have iterated this evening. And I want to say that the treasurer, I mean, the internal order just mentioned about even a simpler method that we consider. So, and by the way, I am not devaluing Madam Assessor's concerns. I think she's well respected. We appreciate her diligence and her commitment to her job. But sometimes in stressful situations, where we're all in this COVID situation, sometimes we have to be a little more flexible in order to achieve the same goal. Let me say one thing. We all agree that recertification or making sure the people who deserve their homestead get their homestead. I don't think one council person saying we do not want anybody who deserves a homestead not to get it. We're just saying that the process and the execution of the process could have been more thoroughly thought out, should have been vetted, should have been discussed with the finance committee and all our council colleagues. And then maybe we need to take a step and rethink how we can move forward with this process. So I'll leave it up to my council colleagues. I hope you agree with that. That's what I think you're saying. And Vice Chair, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, just following up with you, what you said, and all of the colleagues tonight who expressed their concerns. I think we're all saying the same thing. And Madam Assessor, this is no personal assault on you. You just happen to be standing at the end of the line here. We do want to work with you. We want to get this right. And we have very many concerns, and we want to be part of creating a solution to this so that everybody's objectives are served. I do think it's appropriate to continue this matter, Mr. Chair. I would like to see something in writing, whether that is provided prior to our next meeting. I think that would be great. In addition, I'm very concerned about the security of personal identifiable information, PII. Anytime you deal with capturing documents that contain personal information, you assume a duty for its care. I'm not aware, I'm not saying we don't do it and we don't do it well, but I'm not aware of what the city's security policies and procedures are. I do think that we would also like to see that. So that's an ask. I have concerns about security of the homegrown program. I know that it's cumbersome, so I'd like to see what protections are in place in regard to that. And just more about the program that was developed and how it is used and what changes are going to be made to make it more user-friendly, if at all. So those are the things that I would like to ask for, Mr. Chair. And if it's okay, I'd like at this point to make a motion to continue unless there's further discussion.
So a motion to continue. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Council Castillo. Discussion. I think we have the internal who has their hand. I think she has a further comment, and maybe you also can give us some information on how they do it down in that state you were in.
Okay, I will. Just one comment about the potential dual homestead owner. I will go back and I will check your certified tax roll. I can sort by person, and you can see if one person with the same name is getting two homesteads. I mean, I think that's a simple approach to take for now. Unless there's something I'm missing in that certified tax roll. Maybe the names are not exact, but they're close enough. I mean, we could do further research on that. I will be happy to go through that because I do support doing a certification 100%, but I think it's just very burdensome at this point, or to do this annually, even for your department. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well said.
All right, just very quickly, I think what you heard this evening was that if we had these comments, and I looked at the finance director and CFO a year ago, 6 months ago, 7 months ago, when we were meeting and talking about city's finances, and you brought this up, I'm sure the internal order and all my council colleagues would have explained what their concerns were then versus post. And that's how a collaboration works, right? And that's the part that gives me dismayed about. So with that, I don't, Mr. Mancini, you want to have the last word, Mr. Mancini?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say to yourself, the council president, and council members that I would be remiss if I did not at least say on record that it wasn't intentional. It wasn't that during the various budget and other finance meetings that we had that we omitted that. It wasn't an act of omission, Mr. Chairman, and we will endeavor to do everything in our power, working with our assessor, to make this process as easy as possible. But I do have to support the notion of certification for all the right reasons. One last comment, Mr. Chairman, about internal auditor's comment about dual certification. Sometimes it's not a person who has a dual certification in the city, the same city. They could own a second piece of property. It's my understanding that nationwide, you are only entitled to one homestead. You can own 2 homes or 3 homes. You can only have one homestead in America. I happen to know personally a neighbor of mine who had a homestead in this town and in Florida. The Florida assessor went back and corrected 12 years because they had a license plate on a vehicle in Rhode Island that was a vanity plate. My point is, there is a process for that, and that's the reason why certification, so that there's not dual benefit. Sometimes it's unintentional, but I do know it's not just a duplicate name in Providence. They may have a duplicate, they may have a homestead in another city or town. That's part of the process, and I wanted to put that on record. But we will endeavor to return to this committee with all of the questions that were raised this evening, and we will have something to present.
Thank you, and I think you should seriously consider some of these strong suggestions from my council colleagues about a better corrective action plan, anywhere from extension to suspension at this time. So you may seriously want to consider that, and/or modification of what you're doing, per what the internal auditor just talked about, a simple solution. So with that, no more further comments or questions. A motion to continue has been stated in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Well, thank you all this evening for coming. Madam Assessor, CFO, Finance Director, all council colleagues, Internal Audit Treasurer. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
By Vice Chair, second by Councilor Castillo. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you all. Be well and be safe.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. That's good.